So welcome everyone to the State of Student U. My name is Scott Morrison, and I believe my name is Scott Morrison-MC. So for today, you can refer to me as MC Scott, and that'll be my stage name for the next hour. And I am just absolutely delighted to be able to facilitate a conversation, to hear from the wonderful people who do the work at Student U. And as we will find, they do not do the work alone. It is a community effort. It is inspired by the community. It is work with and for the community. And so we're going to hear from them in just a moment. I have been around Student U for, I think, a decade in various capacities, but mostly as their #1 fan. As someone who is in teacher education, I particularly like the way that they prepare teachers to work with kids in ways that are affirmative and responsive and asset-based and dynamic and interdisciplinary. It's all the things that I want to see in classrooms across Durham and across the state. And let's just go ahead and do a couple reminders, making sure that you are on mute. And if you want to use the speaker view instead of the gallery, you can see the person speaking directly. You can also choose the gallery approach to see all the faces and boxes. And we are going to be discussing today, like where Student U has been in the past year and kind of what is needed moving forward. And we're going to share some initiatives and projects and goals for the coming year. And that is going to include ways that you can contribute and participate because we do not do this work alone. So let's do a bit of an icebreaker. We're 3 minutes in. We're going to use the chat for this. So in what I would call typical Student U fashion, we're going to focus on joy. So what is bringing you joy right now? If you are comfortable and able to head to the chat, what is bringing you joy right now? I will go ahead and contribute right now. Being with you all brings me joy. And we have, wow, some great contributions already. Definitely the warmer days, bluebirds, Friday, banana bread in the oven. That sounds good. That would bring me joy too. Great coworkers and friends. Cat on lap. Yeah. Shout out to the dog. It's good. The spring flowers. Kombucha. I have not seen kombucha in the chat, I don't think, in the last 2 years. This is a first for me. And as a kombucha fan, I give this 2 thumbs up. Got blossoms on the trees, grandchildren, coffee. Cheers to that. Katanji Brown Jackson. There we go. Shout out. Supreme Court. Don't often get Supreme Court mentions in the chat on Zoom calls, but this one's a good one. Family, sunny days, gardening. Yeah. All right. 2-year-old in a triathlon at school, Alex. That sounds amazing. I want to see like the TikTok version later. Oh, lots of gardening references. Oh, Chris. Appreciate it. Although that's not MC Scott, so I'm not sure if that's me or not. Okay. It is 12:05. It is about time to move us along. Hopefully everyone's had time to get situated and join us. So I'm gonna, in a moment, let Amy and Elena and Michelle and Bettina answer a question, but just wanna highlight them as the main people who will be talking today. Amy Salo is the interim director and chief operating officer. Elena Mina is Student U's program director. Michelle Norwood is the associate director of high school programming. And Bettina Umstead is the Durham Public Schools Board of Education chair. I feel like I need to sit up a little straighter when I say that. Okay. All right. So distinguished panelists, amazing people, the 4 of you. I have a question for you all that you only have 90 seconds or less to answer to get us started. The question is, how has your past shaped who you are today? Amy, we're going to you first. What's your response?
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Glad to have you here. Hello, everybody. Yeah, for me growing up, I was a fairly introverted child. I was an only child, had a pretty small family, but my parents worked really hard to make sure I grew up surrounded by a community of people. I was able to be involved in extracurriculars. I was a dancer, I was an athlete, various groups of friends at school and church, and a tight knit neighborhood. And that value of being surrounded by a community is something that I've carried into my adult life and is something that's really important to myself and my family now. My husband and I prioritize this for ourselves, for our children. We live our everyday lives in a pretty small geographic radius within Durham. We are active in our church. We're part of a community of other foster parents. We moved 3 weeks ago into a house here in Durham with my mom and my aunt living with us. So we're experiencing intergenerational living at home, and rooting ourselves. I really believe that rooting ourselves in community gives us the ability and brings the responsibility of being accountable to other people and of making change in our community versus being passive or critical observers of our communities. And one of the communities I've been a part of the longest now is Student U, and that community aspect here is what drew me in and what keeps me here, which I'm sure is true for many of you as well.
All right, thank you, Amy. Elena, up to you. How has your past shaped who you are today?
Yeah. Whenever I think of my past, I always think of my childhood, and my childhood was really heavily influenced by my identical twin sister. And we are like twins. We were the type of babies that would cry if we weren't in the same crib. We're very, very close. And whenever I talk about being a kid, I usually accidentally slip into saying we instead of me. I think having a twin gave me an immediate community from day one, because I've always had someone who's loved me, accepted me, known me really well, and vice versa towards her. I think that shaped me today because I deeply value and thrive in a community with others. And I'm really thankful every day to work at an organization like Student U that holds community as such a high pillar. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Amazing. I can't wait to meet your twin one day. Michelle, same question. How's your past shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I did not have the best behavior when I was in middle school, but my freshman year in high school, I saw my sister go through her college application process as a senior, and there were conversations about the schools she wanted to attend and the schools that we were able to afford. And that aspect, along with grades and scholarships, was a fascinating journey to observe. So in ninth grade, I made it a point to shift my behavior and double down on my work. And because I was determined to, and all of this was because I was determined to go to college for free. I graduated in the top 10% of my class. I attended North Carolina Central on a full scholarship. My parents supported me the whole way. And I have people in my village who continue to encourage me to this day. So I think when I think about it, I see myself in our students, and then I feel for our parents. And I love being a part of an organization that empowers our young people to own their education, helps them write their own narrative, and helps them tear down all these barriers.
Excellent. And I know you have passed that down to Chris as well. All right, up to you, Bettina. How has your past shaped who you are today?
I'm just so glad to be here with you all. My past, I was raised by educators. My mom was a school counselor. I have aunts and uncles and grandparents who played all kinds of different roles in schools. And I watched how they advocated for myself and for my sister and for the family and friends and other folks that they knew to make sure they got the education that they deserved. So that was putting me in advanced classes, even though I might have said I don't want to go, making sure that I was in classes with students who also looked like me, and then giving me extracurricular activities to participate in that would develop me as a whole child. They pushed me to really grow and dream big for college and what my life would be like after that. I initially didn't want to be an educator, secret, but I knew that that's where my heart was, right? That was my calling. When I got to college, I pursued that. They instilled to whom much is given, much is required in me. And so I felt like it's my opportunity now to give back to the students of Durham and make sure they have what they need to succeed.
Wow, thank you so much, Bettina and Michelle and Amy and Elena. And we are right on time. Um, if you know anything about Student U, you know a couple things. Number one, you know that snaps are important. And so we don't want you to unmute and snap really, but you can like show us that you're snapping, or you can also use the reactions that are available on the bottom of your screen. So feel free to share love and joy and affirmation in that way. You also know that we don't do anything by accident at Student U. And notice I said we, so I'm making myself a part of Student U right now. We have planned everything. And so that question about how your past has shaped who you are today was intentional. And I want you to be thinking about why that was the question we asked our panelists. All right, thank you, Bettina, for finishing us off there. I do want to slide in here that one of my first introductions was with Bettina talking about curriculum at the old Foster's Market in Chapel Hill, where she said, this is what we've been thinking of and trying to do. And that brought me in and I was like, whoa, what is this organization? Tell me more. And I have been a huge fan ever since. All right, so Amy, I'm gonna start a series of questions and you're up first. The first is, we want you to tell us how Student U has grown and where are we today?
Great, thank you, Scott. First, I would love another audience participation question. If you will drop in the chat the first year that you were aware of or involved at Student U. So I want to start to see some years. It could be 2022. If you're at this event and this is the first time you've been involved here, this is considered involvement, so that you are now involved in 2022. I see lots of different years here. I'm hoping we can maybe, you know, span the whole gamut of 2006 until 2022. So at Student U, if you've been around, you know this, you know that we always start with the why. Our why at Student U has remained the same for the past 15 years. And that is that we believe in a Durham where all students can succeed. This belief is shared among our full community, our students and their families, our staff, our board, our partners at the W.G. Pearson Center. It drives every decision that we make. Like Scott said, nothing is done on accident. That drives every decision we make, and it drives every evolution and expansion of our work. Student U has looked very different in each of those years that you all started your involvement because we continue growing and learning and expanding. Student U was started in 2006 as a middle school summer program to employ local college students in leading a summer academy to combat what is sometimes referred to as summer learning loss, or to make sure that students were ready to advance to the next grade in August. As those initial middle school students got older, Student U services grew with them until 2018, when we had a full year-round program throughout a full 11-year pipeline, which is 6th grade through college graduation for first-generation college-bound students and students who qualify for free or reduced lunch in almost every public school in Durham. This direct service work throughout this 11-year pipeline with our students is and will always be the place where most of our resources are directed and where most of our staff energy is spent. However, in the past few years, Student U has had opportunities to evolve and expand in ways that we're really excited about. In 2018, we were able to make the W.G. Pearson Center our permanent home, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a little while. And in 2020, we adopted our new mission statement, which says that we empower and equip first-generation college students, their families, and educators to become the leaders that will transform our city. To that end, with this new mission, we have two other core approaches in addition to our direct service work. The first one is developing student and family-led advocacy strategies in order to create spaces where our students and their families can be heard and listened to as we all work towards a society that better serves our full community. Again, you'll get a chance to hear a little bit more about that work later. And last but not least, our third core approach is the sharing of our best practices. This includes our efforts to disseminate the skill sets and strategies that have made us successful over the past 15 years. This usually looks like hosting trainings in restorative justice discipline practices, consulting on best practices for nonprofit management. And as of last fall, we got to train a new set of Durham Public Schools employees known as Student Success Coaches, which was a position modeled after Student U's high school advocate program to better support high school students in their schools. These new approaches have the ability to expand our reach beyond what we can do just through direct service work alone. And with a why, like believing in a Durham where all students can succeed, we know that these evolutions of our mission are really necessary, and we're leaning into those. Lastly, you will see me, fingers crossed, back in my usual role as Chief Operating Officer soon. I'm serving in this interim executive director role while we search for our new ED. We've been so fortunate to have two truly amazing leaders over the past 15 years, and I'm confident that we'll find the right person to step into that role soon. But that being in a leadership transition is certainly a critical part of who Student U is right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. All right, I'm gonna switch gears. We're gonna go to Bettina for the next question. And Bettina, you now have a different perspective. You're looking across Durham Public Schools. So what successes and challenges have you seen in DPS this past year?
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for that question. It's been a different year, but there's been a lot of success in Durham Public Schools. This fall, we brought students back to somewhat of a more normal schedule, even though there's been some disruptions, and really put into place some safety practices to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 so our kids could be in-person learning. The first thing we focused on was the social and emotional health of our students. We recognized that the isolation of being at home took a toll on all of us, students included. So we've adopted curriculum to help support growth mindset, self-regulation, self-efficacy skills. We also added some mental health counselors to deepened our partnership with community to make sure that students have what they need. I want to shout out the DPS Foundation, who just launched a huge program that's going to increase mental health capacity in our schools. So we had to take care of the child first, right? The heart. And then we focused on student academic growth. DPS has worked to implement a curriculum that's going to be really strong for our students. We had summer learning, something that we've learned a lot about from community partners. We also have additional math and literacy supports to make sure students have what they need. And like Amy mentioned, we implemented some new individualized strategies to support students. And this last year in 2021, we had an 87% graduation rate, which is an increase for the public school system. Now we're doing all of that with an equity lens. Our Office of Equity Affairs has been expanded, and they're providing trainings on how to affirm students' identity. We want schools to be a place where students want to go, where families feel honored and their expertise are listened to, and that educators also feel like it's a place where they can learn, they can work, and they can grow. We're working really hard in DPS to make sure that the impacts of the pandemic are not what shape our progress moving forward, but we're centering our students, their experiences, to make sure they have what they need to thrive.
Thank you so much for that, Bettina. So we're going to come back to the Student U perspective. I'm going to go to Elena for the next question. Elena, what has Student U seen students and families needing this school year?
Yeah. So like Bettina just shared, this school year has definitely been a roller coaster, and there have been a lot of successes and challenges that our school community has experienced. Here at Student U, though, we've seen a lot of needs for our students and families, but I'll highlight 3 areas in particular and share some examples of what that's looked like for us. To get us started, I actually want to also ask for audience participation. Take a second and think about a meaningful teacher that you have had in your educational experience. And once you have them in your mind, please use a heart emoji or a heart reaction so we can all see that. Yeah, so I think we've had a lot of amazing teachers. My mind went immediately to my 2nd grade teacher, Miss Rosemary at Barton Creek Elementary School. And I think we've always known this, but this past year has really enhanced the fact that students need great teachers. We've all thought of a great teacher in our history, and our current students deserve the same. There is a teacher shortage nationally, and DPS is unfortunately not immune to that challenge. While COVID did disrupt things, we know that students are brilliant and capable, and they can make up academic gaps, but they can't do that without great teachers. And so let me give you an example of what that's looked like for us this past year. Every year, we hold an application period for interested students to apply to our program. And part of that process includes submitting grade reports. One student who actually just received her acceptance letter to Student U added as part of her application process that she had limited mathematics grades because she had had substitute teachers the whole year. Another example is from our middle school staff member. She shared that when she was supporting a group of students in January to finalize assignments and work that needed to be submitted before the end of quarter two, which quarter two in DPS ends at the end of January, that she was getting no response from a few teachers when she reached out about assignment details. She later found out that several of them did not return after the winter holidays, so there was no instructor for those courses, and students were submitting assignments for the courses that students were submitting assignments for didn't have an instructor, and so students were feeling really nervous and kind of worried about how they would wrap up the quarter well. I think these examples highlight some of the hidden ways that teachers are so enormously essential. They're not only necessary to support the academic progress of students, but they are the ones who day in and day out create stable, caring environments for our next generation. And that importance can't be understated. Questions we're holding at Student U in regards to this is, how can we support our community's teachers through the work that we are doing? And how do we support students academically and social emotionally during seasons when they are experiencing teacher turnover? A second need we've seen is we've unfortunately seen an increase in the need for mental health supports, both for students themselves and also for their parents who are seeking out knowledge about how to help their children. This is not new. These needs were all here prior to the pandemic, but COVID-19 really brought them to the forefront. I encourage you all to take a look at the Onward white paper that we will send out in our follow-up communication from this event. It was published recently in collaboration with DPS, the DPS Foundation, Office of Youth, Village of Wisdom, and Student U. And that paper highlights, among several other things, the mental health needs of our students. Let me give you an example of what this has looked like for us at Student U this year. A high school student in our program spent a lot of time at home at the beginning of the pandemic and unfortunately suffered from excessive video gaming. After so many months at home, alone, playing video games, adjusting to jumping in to the highly social, fast-paced life of high school was deeply overwhelming for the student, and they needed mental health support to be able to do it well. We've also seen parents who've been sharing concerns about the exposure of their kids to more maladaptive coping strategies like vaping, drugs and alcohol, self-cutting even. And parents are seeking out resources and knowledge about how to support their students through challenges like this. And as a community, we can work together to supply these needs. So questions we're holding right now at Student U are, how do we identify the mental health needs of our students and parents and provide for those needs in a collaborative way with our larger community? And how can we share what we have learned about these supports and what works for students with the greater community so that more students can be positively impacted? And third, we have also seen that students really do need affirming environments that are culturally responsive. As students are reading books, as they're exploring art, as they are interacting with people in their schools, we want to be able to hear them thinking to themselves, oh yeah, my family does that too. Or I guess my ancestors really are amazing. Or even something as simple as, hey, her hair's just like mine. Creating affirming environments may sound nice and easy, but in practice, this is a huge undertaking because our historic education systems aren't really set up to do that well. At Student U, we have seen DPS work very hard to support this in our schools, and that's incredible because it is not a priority in all places. An exciting way that we are leaning in hard this year to create more affirming environments that are culturally responsive at Student U is through a newly developed full-scale curriculum that has been written by local educators. You'll hear more about this from Michelle next, but this curriculum has been developed to be specifically anti-racist and culturally responsive. And so, for example, this summer, our sixth graders will explore the theme of identity when they focus on civilizations in West Africa and ancient America in their Global Connect class. And high school students will have the opportunity to take ethnic studies like Black studies and Latinx power. So those are the three big needs that we have seen this academic year: the need for great teachers, the need for mental health supports, and the need for affirming environments. But to wrap up, I do want to say that I think it is important to keep in mind that we all had challenges from COVID, but when we come together like we're doing on this lunch hour call right now, a lot can be accomplished, and our children are definitely worth it.
Wow, thank you so much, Elena. Michelle, I'm going to turn to you now. So Elena's just laid out some of the challenges and some of the ways that Student U is addressing this. So my question for you is, how has Student U been supporting students this year and addressing those needs that Elena just mentioned? And kind of a second part is, what is Student U doing to kind of grow their impact to affect more students in Durham?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Scott. So as I think about the needs that Elena just shared in conjunction with our current programming, I like to highlight 2 to 3 ways we as a program have decided to mature and or increase our methods of support for our students and families this year. I've noticed that all of our programs are operating with a focus on improving our approach to how we support our students and families. And then I've also seen, as a whole, we are dedicated to incorporating more robust mental wellness and social emotional structures in our work. The last thing I've seen is we remain committed to creating an affirming environment, which you've heard Amy and Elena already address, and that allows students to develop positive racial identities. To my first point regarding our approach to supporting our students and families, one major way we are improving our approach is our intentional shift to move from the whole child approach to more of a focus on intergenerational programming. Student U was founded nearly 15 years ago, and our North Star has always been to put our students and families first. We've had 15 years to work towards mastering support for our students using the whole child approach to education, a focus on social, emotional, mental, physical, and cognitive development skills for our students. And I think that is wonderful. But over time, we've also concluded that our focus can't just be on the child. We found that another way to empower our young people is to combat some of the barriers they're experiencing, is to create more space for intergenerational programming, more space for there to be an exchange of information, experiences, life lessons, and knowledge. Intergenerational programming provides an opportunity to connect with young people, adults, and seniors who are experiencing different phases of life. So we create that space for connection between young adults and our adults by training our summer academy staff to not just lead a classroom, but to develop relationships with the students and their parents. Another great example of intergenerational programming in Student U with regard to young people connecting with seniors involves our tutoring program. Over the course of the pandemic, we've developed new partnerships with the organizations such as OLLI. Virginia, I think I've seen you up here, which solely consists of seniors whose only qualification for membership is to be at least 50 years old and have a lifelong love of learning. Through OLLI, we have a new group of volunteer tutors who have consistently shown up for our students by sharing knowledge around what the students have learned in the schools. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Aside from the work that we do with our staff and volunteers, there is this delicate work of the 2-generation approach, which focuses on the whole family. Our plan here at Student U is to help provide opportunity for families to gain the information, resources, and support needed to guide and advocate for their children. All right, so close your eyes and picture this. On a Thursday evening at the W.G. Pearson Center, we have a family with one child at YRP in our middle school program on the 3rd floor, another child in the high school program receiving after-school tutoring on the 1st floor. The parent is attending a parent workshop across the hall, and their younger child is receiving childcare next door so that the parent can focus. I hope that you are planning to hear more about this work because Amy is going to share a little bit more about who our family engagement coordinator is, and Andrea is going to talk about this new work that we are doing with our programs. So one more piece to know regarding our improvement in the approach is the way we're able to impact more students in Durham by sharing the best practices. Just as we glean from community organizations or how we've attended trainings and conferences to learn and grow, shout out to We Are for the additional training with our curriculum writers on being more culturally responsive. We've stepped out more, and we are doing the same for others. As we continue to evaluate, reflect, and refine our practices, we've honed in on our strengths and are continuing to do more dissemination work within our community. For example, Amy talked about how Durham Public Schools launched their new program for student success coaches. Since their model closely resembles Student U's high school advocate model, we had the pleasure of constructing their initial training. Many of our high school advocates are also DPS teachers and staff, so we asked them to assist with the training of their colleagues. Ellen Holmes, Rakeem Spearman, Daryl Patterson, and Tracy Barrett, all amazing teachers in Durham and exceptional student youth advocates. They did a phenomenal job leading sessions because they understand firsthand both the role of a teacher and advocate, as well as the challenges that teachers and students face to support students with academic success. Let's drop a heart emoji to show love to our advocates and our teachers who are doing such amazing work this year. So I have to highlight the work that we also do in our summer academy to share best practices. This is one of our most amazing pieces of Student U. We recruit experienced teachers as mentors to train and coach our new beginning teachers over the span of 5 weeks. In 2019, 62% of our alumni teachers shared that they have gone into education of some form, and that number continues to grow. Our next move is to really gather the data around how many Student U teachers are now working in Durham Public Schools. Scott said this yesterday. We are not only an academic enrichment program for our students, but we are a teaching training program as well. So to my second point, our program staff has also improved in the way we support our students and families through a more robust mental wellness and social and emotional structure. And this has become more effective for our families and more sustainable for our staff. Our student and family support services team provides wraparound support for all students from middle school, high school, and college. Ashley, our director of student and family support, is also our social worker. She offers individual services for our students and families, but she has also been working on a tiered system of support. Our middle school students participate in weekly wellness sessions. Our high school students can attend workshops geared towards social emotional support as well as physical health. And then we have Alex, our director of learning and academic support, who spearheads how we approach academic support for our students, especially our students with high academic needs, IEPs, or 504s. She also works very closely with our academic coaches. And then there's our family engagement coordinator. I feel like we've been saving her, hyping her up. I'm so excited for you all to hear from her later today. And our family advocates, who are actually parents of our Student U students. They're all operating from a student and families approach. In addition to all the work our students and family support team offers, we also implemented the aspect of restorative practices in our work. Restorative practices is a framework for being that is rooted in showing respect, taking responsibility, and strengthening relationships in our community. Restorative practices shows up in how we operate the day-to-day with our students and families, how we train our staff, and now how we engage in our community as we train other organizations and students and families to operate from a restorative lens. We partnered with Peaceful Schools, hey Crystal, to expand our work beyond Student U. And this fall, we plan to host our second annual restorative practices workshop for parents in the Durham community. I'm pretty excited about that. I'll be supporting with that training. You all should come. So finally, my last point, we are supporting our students by continuing the work of creating affirming environments that allow students to develop positive racial identities. We have been doing this work for a while by operating from an anti-racist lens, but the work Elena described around our new curriculum speaks for itself. Each grade embodies a theme that will empower students to embrace their identities and own their own education. In the high school program, we will now have an ethnic studies department that consists of a Latinx studies course, Black studies, and then our 10th graders are going to come together and they are going to work in the communities of change class, which will work with communities in Durham. We operate with a diverse staff in all of our programs, but more specifically, our summer academy consists of teachers from all backgrounds, age ranges. Some are current teachers and some are aspiring teachers. And my favorite and final note, over the past few years, we continue to have more Student U alumni students come back and work in our program. Talk about affirming environments. Former students who look like our current students who have experienced the program, recognize and value the community, are now coming back to teach and share with our young people. That statement alone deserves all the hearts, all the claps, all the emojis, all the excitement. So shout out to our current students, and some of them are alumni. Arturo, who is currently operating as one of our high school advocates. Laura, who is currently operating as our middle school academic coach for middle school. Lonnie, who's going to be our grade head in our summer academy. And Jaya, who's going to be our internship coordinator in summer academy. Shout out to all our beautiful people coming back and pouring back into our community. Thank you all for letting me take a little bit of your time. I know I talked a lot, but hey, I mean, we're doing a lot of great things. And I appreciate you for letting me talk about the current state of our programming here at Student U. This is only a snippet of the work happening here. Earlier this week, our middle school students hosted their first student staff meeting. Our high school students received notifications for their internship interviews next week. Shout out to Steven. And one of our college students landed an internship opportunity they've been waiting for that they're going to do in the summer. I hope you get an opportunity to learn even more about Student U, and I look forward to hopefully partnering with you at some point in the future. All right, Scott, I think that's it. That was a lot, but I think I got it out. Passing it back to you.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Hold on, I'm kind of hyped up over here. StudentUDurham.org/invest. Enter. Oh, okay, hold on. Let me come. I'll get back to that in just a moment. All right, thank you for all that, Michelle. I'm gonna check to see if there's any job openings later too here. Let me bookmark that page as well. Okay, Amy, I'm gonna come back to you for the next question. And how is Student U continuing to think about how to grow your model and to increase impact?
We definitely picked the right MC. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so I hope you all are starting to get this full picture of how Student U's direct service work. It will always be kind of our flagship program, the meat of what we do, but expanding in these other ways allows us to expand our impact towards this vision of a Y, where all students in Durham, not just the ones that are directly involved in our program, but all students in Durham are able to succeed. And so this is what has spurred our expansion into these other two approaches, being the sharing of best practices, which a few of us have talked about, and our student and family-led advocacy work. In 2021, we hired Andrea Rodriguez into the role of family engagement coordinator. And although she couldn't join us today, we're going to watch a brief video from her about what her work looks like with our families.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Rodriguez. I'm the Family Engagement Coordinator here at Student U. This role is relatively new to the organization. So far, I have used a tiered approach for this work. I have worked to coordinate larger level workshops for parents in our Student U program-wide events hosted by our middle school programs and our high school programs, and those have been more general and broader themed workshops. I have also coordinated smaller, more focused spaces for parents. For example, we have had this past month of March, we had mental health workshops where parents had 4 sessions that they could participate in and just gain more tools and skills when it comes to their own mental health and then supporting their children as well. And then we also have the individual advocacy that still continues to happen with our families. Myself and our 2 family advocates who are also Student U parents work on an individual basis with our parents when we learn about a challenge that they're going through or something that they need more support around, particular situations that are happening in their families, and we work with them to find resources in the community that can support whatever it is that they're navigating through at the time. I really see this work developing into advocacy, with us continuing to really strengthen our relationships with our families, and then from there encouraging them and pushing them and motivating them to create changes, not only in their schools but also in their broader communities, and Student U walking alongside them as they do that work. Some other exciting things that are happening related to the work that we are doing with families. So Student U was recently recommended by Durham Public Schools to participate as part of a 5-year research project led by FHI 360, which is a nonprofit human development organization. And they are focusing specifically on racial equity in math education. The proposal has been submitted to the National Institute of Health, and if funding is allocated, work will begin this fall to start engaging students and families, as well as other community stakeholders, to identify narratives that currently exist surrounding Black and Brown youth's access to higher level math education, and then work to develop new narratives in support and to support racial equity in this area. These will be implemented by Durham Public Schools and evaluated during a 5-year period of time. And this is a really exciting way for Student U to solidify our ability to be a community convener, and a great way for us to really pilot this type of advocacy work with our students and families in pursuit of a more equitable educational experience for them. Another exciting collaboration is with the North Carolina Integrated Care for Kids and the ABC Science Collaborative, which they have created a work group to address the mental health crisis in 6 counties across North Carolina. Student U is involved in the capacity that we are in the work group, and we're sharing best practices on intergenerational family, direct family support funds, and universal social and emotional learning programming and curriculum. Some ways that you can directly support the work that I'm doing. So we know that our families are very busy and we really want to honor their time. So we're always searching for ways to offer incentives for the time that they are giving for our workshops and spaces. So if you would like to donate gift cards, dinner for families, help with childcare, those are always welcome, as well as, we will be hosting and sponsoring different kinds of workshops or opportunities, and some of those come with a cost. If you would like to sponsor one of those opportunities or workshops, it's also something that we're always in search for.
Awesome. So as you can tell, Andrea's work is extremely critical to our organization, and I'm so glad we've been able to grow in that way over the past year. Lastly, I have a very exciting announcement about an upcoming project for us, which is that we are in the midst of planning for and fundraising for a renovation of the W.G. Pearson Center's former elementary school kitchen into a fully functional, commercial-grade commissary kitchen to support culinary entrepreneurs and to provide access to culinary career pathways for Black and Brown entrepreneurs in our community, including our students. If you've been around Student U in the past few years, it's likely that you have been to the W.G. Pearson Center. The W.G. Pearson Center, named after William Gaston Pearson, who we will honor his 164th birthday on Monday. He was a powerful educator of Black children in Durham for decades in the early 1900s. And this building has been a pillar in the Hayti community and in the Fayetteville Street corridor since it was built in 1928. In 2017, Student U was able to make this place our home, and it's now home not only to our work, but to the work of 7 other like-minded nonprofit organizations who have offices and programming space here as well. When Student U was first moving into the W.G. Pearson Center as our permanent home, it was clear from our community listening sessions that neighborhood residents really wanted this to be a safe space to gather together, to work together, to play together. And culinary ideas have sort of been bouncing around our minds for the past few years. And now is the time that we get to act on those. So we've received a large matching grant from the Keenan Charitable Trust to support this renovation and support this project. And we are in the midst of fundraising for the rest of the renovation cost. And we have high hopes that this kitchen could actually be up and running, full of culinary entrepreneurs using it to build their businesses by the end of 2022. There's a lot I could say about this project and why we're so excited to further maximize the use of this space in this way. There will be a little bit of time for us to dive into those details right after this event if you're particularly interested in it. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Scott to do a little bit of Q&A before we close out.
We have a little time for Q&A, and a few of you submitted some questions prior to today that we're going to go over. But I first want to add, under the kind of topic of sharing best practices, I'm a teacher educator at Elon University, and last summer I got to bring my graduate students over to Student U to learn about restorative practices, led mostly by Michelle, which was a wonderful experience. And I got to introduce these teachers, most of whom are in North Carolina, to the work of Student U. And just the other day, let's shout out Tracy Barrett again. I was in her high school classroom as she's mentoring a Duke student teacher. And I got to mentor Tracy about a decade ago, maybe less, Tracy, we're not that old. So Student U again, sharing best practices, bringing teachers into DPS, and then those teachers are mentoring other teachers as well. So the first question is about, we had several people ask questions about learning loss. And if you let me be professor of education for just a second, learning loss is talked a lot about, but I think it's more complicated than people often think, because it's sometimes rests on this assumption that growth is always consistent and linear over time. And it's more complex than that. I'd like to say that Student U was built to handle some of the inequities in our education system. It's one of the reasons it exists. And so I think COVID has definitely brought additional challenges. That is no doubt. So we do want to make sure we address some of the uniquenesses of the past year or two, and as they extend into the future. So the question is to you, Bettina, first, from the TPS perspective, then I'll come to Elena. What are you all doing to address some of the ways that students have been impacted by COVID in the last 2 years?
Thanks, Scott. It's a great question. I think talking about that mental health support that I added earlier this year, but I also think we have been really intentional about how do we accelerate learning versus remediate. So a lot of time remediation of learning means we are kind of doing rote practice of what I should have learned in the past. Whereas acceleration of learning means I'm looking at what I should learn this school year, and we're trying to find some fun and engaging ways to make sure students are connected with that learning. That has been the focus this year. I think students learned a lot while they were home during this time. I've had lots of conversations with families who talked about how they did their own experiments, how they had their own practices, and parents were really being able to be engaged with their students' learning during that time. So we want to figure out how do we build that into what we're currently doing, engaging families who have become, in some ways, a teacher or a teacher assistant at home. How do we keep giving them the skills they need to support student learning? So I think students learned a lot. They may not have learned what have been taught in a traditional classroom. How do we tap into what they've learned and make sure we're accelerating that moving forward?
That's good. And so Elena, just real quick to you, what do you think Student U's been doing and plans to do to address some of the specifics of COVID?
Sure. Yeah. First, I think it's important to remember that the very structure of Student U is set up to counteract systemic injustices in our community and the educational system. And so we had kind of a leg up here. We're sort of built for moments like this. But I'll speak to two things in particular that we've done. So we first have continued to provide targeted academic support in our programming. And so what this looks like is in middle school, students have time during their after-school programming to work explicitly on mathematical fluency, and they have access to individualized literacy intervention through a literacy corps member. In middle school and high school programming, students have access to both in-person and virtual tutoring weekly, and students who need additional targeted support are paired with an academic coach. A second way that we've adapted to this season is we've made sure to provide intentional recreational and social emotional time for students to strengthen their web of friendships and provide positive, well-structured time to just be a young person. When students are whole mentally and spiritually, they are much more prepared to dig in deep and work hard academically. I think the pandemic has taught all of us to slow down and reconnect with the interpersonal ties that make us all human, and we are doing that here at Student U too. If you're interested in how you can support as a community member in this effort, I think this can look like a lot of different ways. It can look like supporting with your time, like volunteering inside of a school or volunteering to be a tutor here at Student U. It can also look like supporting our schools and organizations like Student U through financial gifts that allow us to continue to do this work on behalf of us all. And it can look like supporting through love, like sending a thank you email to one of our amazing educators or principals who work tirelessly to prepare our young people for greatness. We all have something that we can give, and when we all give a little bit, that collective gift goes a really long way.
Thank you, Elena. I feel excited. I'm like a teacher on Zoom, and one of my students wants to participate. Dr. Watkins, raising your hand. Let's go. Get involved.
Oh, good, good. I was like, I want to ask a question, but I didn't know exactly how to do it because you said that people need to pre-submit questions. But I guess this is a bit of a wonky question, so anybody can take a stab at it. But when I worked with students in higher education at Carolina during the pandemic, what I began to see is that there were three groups of students, right? Students whose performance during the pandemic and during virtual learning declined, students whose performance during virtual learning during the pandemic remain unchanged. But most interestingly, and I think a group in which a lot of information can be extrapolated from, is a group of students who somehow improved during the pandemic and during virtual learning experiences. Because I think a lot of information from that could go towards maybe improving education as a whole in general that we may overlook as we kind of long for more classical learning structures. Did we see any of that K through 12? And if so, what was that observation and what kind of information can be extrapolated from that third unique group of students?
Thank you for asking that question. I have a few thoughts, but I want to make sure, Amy, Elena, Michelle, do you have any thoughts in response to that?
I'll quickly jump in to say, yes, absolutely. That was we absolutely saw that at Student U. I spoke about that a little bit last year at this exact same event that we had an example of a student who had a lot of anxiety about being in school and the social pressure of that. And so removing that and being able to do learning inside of her home, she absolutely thrived. And so we have definitely seen that in our middle school, high school, and our college programs. And so I don't have much more to add to that. I just want to affirm that, yes, we have seen the same thing. I saw that with my own individual children during this time. And so I think that you make a really strong point. I think there are a lot of learnings and interests we can take to make programs and education stronger.
Anyone else want to jump in? Michelle, Bettina, Amy?
I'll jump in and just say, yes, that's absolutely correct. And DPS piloted an online academy this summer with Mr. Hickson, who I think is online academy for the year. So it's now a new school in DPS with Mr. Hickson, who is also on the call leading that initiative, because we recognize some students really thrive in the virtual space. The flexibility is helpful for them. And so that's now an option for Durham Public School families starting in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade to have a virtual schooling option.
All right, thank you both for responding to that question. Thank you, Dr. Watkins, for jumping in there. Very welcome. Okay, so we need to kind of move toward the end here. I will say we had another question kind of queued up that was about assessing our curriculum and learning more about it, making sure that we are getting from it what we want to get from it. And then a great question in the chat about supporting LGBTQ+ students and families, which I know is a priority. It's always been a part of the conversation since I've been at Student U. I want to kind of press pause on those questions to make sure we get to our end material, but we do have a bonus 10 minutes at the end where we'll primarily learn about this kitchen initiative, but we might be able to answer a few more questions then. So let me turn it back over to our guests, our panelists, I should say. Michelle first, what does Student U need to make the vision possible?
Yeah, Elena tapped in a little bit, but we talked about the different positions that we have available here at Student U, many in part-time capacities, many with the hours that if you're working a full-time position, you could actually do this on the side. And then we even have volunteer opportunities, especially with our tutoring program, where we're always trying to fine tune it so that we can best support our middle and high school. And now sometimes our college students are joining us as well in our tutoring program. So really want you all to get involved with Student U. And then you can check out our website for any of those available positions. But the more involvement that we can have in the community, the more we build partnerships and the more that we can also give outside the community as well.
Elena, same question, ways to support.
Yeah, come visit us at Summer Academy this year. We've got a lot of exciting things that are happening and we would love and be very honored to have a chance to be able to show you and get up close and see what our programs look like. Look for a follow-up communication after this event, and that will have some specific details about how to come and tour our summer academy. And keep in the back of your mind that we hold a career day every year. So if you're interested in presenting about your profession to our students, we have a great opportunity for you to engage in that way too.
Excellent. And to Amy, same question, ways people can support to make the vision possible. Let's get some of those links in the chat too.
Thanks. I have two answers to this. Only one of them involves money, no surprises. The first one is that we would love for you to share our executive director job posting and job description, position profile with your networks. Please read through the profile and be thinking about whether there's anybody in your networks that you think could be the right next leader for Student U. We are taking our time with this process because we want to get it right, and we welcome any support or recommendations as we look for our person. So I think we'll put that information in the chat. Yes, it's there. Secondly, is the money part. We cannot do this work, all the work that you've heard about today, we cannot do it without your financial support. Our annual budget as an organization is approaching $3.5 million, and donations of every size are what make up that big number each year and allow us to do this work. So if you are not already, many of you are, if you're not already investing in Student U financially, we would love for you to consider what generosity in that way could look like. So thank you.
Excellent. All right, y'all, it is 12:57. We are back to being almost right on schedule. We want to hear from you. So there's going to be a link that comes in the chat pretty quickly. There it is, right on time, Brandy. We want to hear from you. Like, what's your capacity for supporting Student U? What ways can you contribute to the mission and the vision and the values of Student U? And if you're kind of on board with creating a more just and equitable Durham, what could collaboration and partnership look like? What ideas do you have? What vision do you have? So click on that Google form. I'm going to give you just a couple seconds to click on it, to get it open. Keep that window open. Don't close it. All right, I'm looking at y'all. I'm looking through your cameras. I'm looking to see if you've clicked on the link. Actually, I'm not. It sounds kind of creepy. Just click on the link. We want to hear from you. And I'm going to give you like 10 more seconds to make sure you get it up and look at it. As you know, when we started this Zoom call today, Bettina and Elena and Michelle and Amy talked about how the past has shaped who they are. And they all mentioned something about the community they were in and the people around them that supported them. And Student U equally relies on the community to do the work that they do. So hearing your voice and perspective is important. All right, let's wrap it up. Amy, your closing remarks.
My closing remarks is just a huge thank you. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. I know this was a lot of information to listen to, and that's because Student U is doing a lot of work. Our work is broad and expansive in pursuit of this really big dream. And I hope that's what draws you in and what allows you to be part of it. Thank you especially for supporting us through a leadership transition. Our team is really strong. We're really excited to see who our new executive director is, and your support in the meantime through the season is really invaluable. So thank you for being here.
And at 12:59, I too want to thank everyone for being on the call today. Your participation, your support, just showing up and being here means a lot. Your financial support, your moral support, your encouragement, it all matters. Your time, your energy, the ways that you go about promoting a more just and equitable Durham, it all matters. And we're all needed in this work. Just want to remind everyone, a theme that I've seen across this call is the importance of social emotional well-being and community, that we need our communities to help us all grow. We need each other's support. So just a reminder, our students and families need support. Our loved ones need support. We need to support one another as best we can. And as long as I've been involved with Student U, I know that has been one of their #1 goals. It is a place that every time I go to, I feel better when I leave, including the Zoom call. And come on, how often do you walk away from a Zoom call feeling better? about your day and energized. Very few, but I'd like to think this is one of them. So thank you all. It is 1 o'clock. We are now going to go into the overtime session. No judgment if you have to leave. Well, okay. Little bit of judgment if you have to leave, but no more than just a little bit. No, for real. If you have to go, we totally understand. But if you're interested in hearing more about this W.G. Pearson Center kitchen project, we're going to hear more about that from Amy and maybe do a little more Q&A in the final 10 minutes. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
All right. So if you're able to stay on for a few more minutes, we are grateful. We could not pack it all into 1 hour. So thanks for being generous with your time. I mentioned briefly this kitchen project that we are working on, and wanted to go into a little bit more detail about that. I know that a commissary kitchen feels a little bit like a pivot for Student U. It's a little bit different than other work that we've done, but it's so aligned, and I hope I can paint that picture for you. Like I mentioned, when we first moved into this building as our permanent home, we did a lot of community listening sessions to hear about what the people around us in the Hayti neighborhood particularly wanted to see this building used for. Like I said, this building has been a pillar in this community for a long time. It's been an elementary school and a middle school and a high school over the past almost 100 years. And we wanted to make sure that it was continuing to serve the community really well. And we're in a neighborhood that there is a lack of access to healthy and fresh food. There are not a lot of restaurants within walking distance. And yet there's this desire, we're in Durham, everybody loves food. There's this desire for there to be culinary opportunities. The culinary industry is one of the ones with the lowest barrier to entry for a new entrepreneur. And there's a lot of, what we often hear as necessity-based entrepreneurship, someone who sort of needs to start their own business to be able to make ends meet. And a lot of times their first foray into entrepreneurship is in a culinary way, especially in our community. And so we kept hearing that from people. We want to know what can be done in the kitchen. There's a school, it's a school kitchen. It was a fully functioning school kitchen for a long time. And it's attached to a big cafeteria, and what can be done with that space to serve the community. And so over the past couple of years, we've sort of been forming partnerships and talking to people in the culinary industry. And we're really excited to have landed on a partnership with a group called the Culinary Them Collective. This is a group that is an offshoot from Communities in Partnership, or CIP, which you might be familiar with. And the Culinary Them Collective is a cooperative of female identifying Black and Brown culinary business owners who are trying to create sort of an interdependent network with one another to build their businesses. So they are all at different stages of entrepreneurship. Their businesses are at different stages, but they're creating a true cooperative and interdependent relationships in order to support each other. And I didn't know much about commissary kitchens before the past couple years, but I know now that they are scarce and they are expensive, that getting commissary space, which is always needed for something like a food truck or a small business who sells a consumer good or a catering company, they need storage, they need limited kitchen space. They don't need a 24-hour kitchen 7 days a week, but they need 4 hours of kitchen space on a Saturday night. Like they need some of those spaces to wash dishes, to store dry goods, to store catering equipment. And it's scarce and hard to come by, and it's expensive. And that becomes the barrier to having a successful business for these necessity-based, necessity-driven entrepreneurs. And so that is really exciting to us. I think that is very parallel, very aligned with the mission of Student U to create career opportunities to help our community thrive in this way. And this kitchen, the idea is that this kitchen has lots of workstations for lots of different organizations or companies along with this Culinary Them Collective to share the space. And then to also have space for our students to learn. We want to provide culinary training opportunities for that to be a part of the work that we're offering to our students while they're here in the building. And it allows us to have the opportunity to serve fresh, warm, hot meals to families when they're here, or healthy snacks to our students when they're here for programming. We've been limited in that way just because we didn't have a functioning kitchen until now. So we're very excited about this project. We are expecting this project to cost us about $1.2 million. The Keenan Charitable Trust has committed $800,000 to this project, which was a huge win for us, and is sort of why we know that we are ready to take this on. 400,000 of their full gift is a matching gift. So right now we are in the process of raising $400,000 to get their second $400,000, which will equal our full 1.2 for the project to be brought to completion. And so that's sort of where we are right now. We are in the process of, we've built a case for support that we will make sure you all have access to. We are talking to a lot of people in the culinary industry in Durham, restaurateurs and people who might have access to equipment or who know the right people who might want to invest in something like this. I think the right investors are people who care about student use core work, because this is so related to that, or the food industry or entrepreneurship. There's so many sort of intersections of what this project is. So I hope that this is exciting to you all. If it is, please feel free to connect us to more people that you might know. If you know someone we should be talking to about this, if you yourself are interested in investing in this, please do so. You can let us know that you want to designate any gift to Student U for specifically this matching gift for our kitchen. And as part of the case for support that we'll make sure you have, you can read more about the Culinary Femme Collective in this group that'll sort of be the primary group using the kitchen space as we get started. So anyway, we're hoping that we can meet this match. Construction can happen this fall, and we have a fully functioning kitchen by the end of this year. And that's we will be further maximizing the use of this very large, beautiful building that we're in.